The 18-pounder is cold. Not the cold of winter. San Antonio mornings in early March carry a raw, damp chill, but the dead cold of iron that has not been fired in hours. The kind of cold that seeps through wool gloves and into the bones of the hands gripping it. It is somewhere between 4 and 5 in the morning on March 6, 1836. The Alamo compound is quiet. It is the heavy stillness of men too exhausted to speak, listening to the darkness beyond the walls for the sound they know is coming. Approximately 200 defenders. Perhaps as few as 182, perhaps as many as 260. Sources still argue. Outside those crumbling limestone walls, arranged in 4 assault columns in the pre-dawn blackness, wait between 1,500 and 1,800 Mexican soldiers. With reserves, the force numbers closer to 2,500. The compound the defenders hold was never a fort. It was a Spanish mission, a church with a courtyard. Its walls are 2 to 3 feet thick in places, but they stretch across nearly 3 acres. The perimeter alone runs over a quarter of a mile. To defend it properly, an engineer would want 1,000 men. They have a fifth of that. They have held for 13 days. They will not hold for one more. The smell inside the compound is layered. Black powder residue baked into every surface, cattle dung, and unwashed wool. Beneath it all drifts the faint sweetness of infection from rooms where the wounded lie. Somewhere in one of those rooms, James Bowie lies on a cot, burning with fever. He can barely sit upright. Beside him rest a pair of pistols and a heavy hunting knife. On the north wall, a 26-year-old lawyer from Alabama named William Barret Travis is responsible for everything else. 200 men behind walls that were never meant to stop an army. 13 days without reinforcement. And in the darkness, the sound of boots on packed earth moving into position for the final assault. Why did they stay? In the spring of 1836, the Texas Rebellion against Mexico was a fragile, disorganized thing. Sam Houston, the man tasked with building an army capable of actual resistance, needed weeks he did not have. Every day the Mexican army spent besieging a crumbling mission in San Antonio was a day Houston could use to recruit, train, and maneuver. If the Alamo fell quickly, Santa Anna's army would pour eastward into the settlements. The rebellion would collapse before it truly began. The garrison could not win, but it could delay. The man who chose to hold it was Travis, young, ambitious, possessed of a flair for dramatic prose. On February 24th, he wrote an open letter pleading for help, vowing never to surrender or retreat. Reinforcements barely materialized. Only 32 men from Gonzales slipped through Mexican lines on March 1st. The garrison was a patchwork. Tejano ranchers, Tennessee volunteers led by former U.S. Congressman David Crockett, regular Texas soldiers, adventurers, and a handful of European immigrants. They had roughly 20 artillery pieces, but far too few trained gunners. The man coming for them, General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, commanded a professional army that had force-marched through winter desert to reach San Antonio ahead of schedule. His infantry were equipped with Baker rifles and Brown Bess muskets. To his officers studying the compound through field glasses, the siege was a matter of basic arithmetic. Surround, bombard, assault, finish. The Alamo compound itself invited encirclement. The north wall was the weakest section. Crockett's position on the south palisade was little more than timber and packed earth. Houston himself had reportedly questioned the wisdom of trying to hold it. Travis could have attempted a breakout. The Mexican lines were porous enough to allow couriers through. Whether staying was tactical conviction, a gamble on reinforcements, or simple pride, the result was the same. They stayed. For 12 days, Santa Anna's artillery had hammered the walls. It was a steady, grinding erosion. Each day the walls crumbled a little more. Each night Mexican engineers pushed their battery positions closer. The defenders answered with their own cannon and famously accurate rifle fire. But the math was relentless. Every Mexican casualty could be replaced. Every Texan casualty could not. Sleep came in fragments. On the night of March 5th, the bombardment stopped. For the first time in nearly 2 weeks, the defenders could hear the wind. The sudden quiet meant only one thing. The breach was ready. What the defenders could not see was the assault force assembling in the darkness. 4 columns, positioned to hit the perimeter simultaneously. Sometime around 5 a.m. on March 6th, a Mexican bugler sounded the Deguello, a call demanding unconditional surrender and promising no quarter. The columns advanced. They were ordered to move silently, but discipline frayed. A shout went up, and within seconds, the walls erupted. The defenders fired everything they had. Artillery double-loaded with canister and scrap iron tore into the packed columns at close range. The first wave met concentrated fire at the north wall and stalled. Mexican soldiers fell in clusters. Columns veered off course in the darkness, piling into each other. The initial assault was repulsed, but the retreating columns compressed. Men from the eastern and northern attacks drifted toward the northwest corner, inadvertently massing overwhelming numbers against the weakest point of the defense. The north wall broke first. Soldiers found purchase on the earthen reinforcements. Scaling ladders hit the weakened timber, and sheer weight of numbers pushed men over the defenses. Once the perimeter was breached, the geometry of the defense collapsed entirely. Travis fell early in the assault, shot on the north rampart. He was 26. Defenders spread across a quarter-mile of wall could not fall back to a concentrated position fast enough. Mexican soldiers turned the captured artillery pieces inward, firing the defenders' own cannon into the courtyard. The battle fragmented into desperate room-to-room engagements. Doors were barricaded. Men fired through loopholes punched in interior walls. During these close-quarters fights, many defenders ran out of ammunition. Mexican officer José Enrique de la Pena later noted the brutal nature of the resistance. Narrow doorways became choke points. Single defenders fought with knives and rifle butts, buying a few extra seconds before the sheer numbers overwhelmed them. The chapel fell last. Defenders barricaded inside fired through the doorway and windows until the infantry pushed through. By the time full daylight reached San Antonio, the battle was over. It had lasted roughly 90 minutes. Bowie died in his room. Too sick to stand, accounts suggest he was killed in his bed, likely with his pistols drawn when Mexican soldiers breached the door. The question of how Crockett died has consumed historians for nearly 2 centuries. The traditional version places him fighting to the last in the courtyard. A competing account claims he and a small group were captured alive and executed on Santa Anna's direct orders shortly after the battle. Regardless of the exact circumstances, Crockett died at the Alamo that morning. The manner of his death has consumed more ink than its meaning. An assault against a crumbling mission defended by fewer than 200 men produced casualties that stung a professional army. Estimates of Mexican losses range from 250 to over 600 killed and wounded. Santa Anna ordered the defenders' bodies burned. He released a few survivors to carry a message of intimidation back to the Texan settlements. He severely misjudged the effect that message would have. The Alamo fell. Every combatant defender died. By any tactical measure, it was a total defeat. But Santa Anna's army had spent 13 days pinned to a small town in southern Texas. Those 2 weeks purchased something critical: time for the rest of the rebellion to organize. When Houston finally met Santa Anna at the Battle of San Jacinto on April 21st, his soldiers charged screaming a phrase that had already become a war cry. The survivors' accounts from the Alamo did not spread panic. They ignited a violent fury. A fortified position, even a flawed one, defended by determined fighters, costs an attacker far more than the arithmetic suggests. Santa Anna could have bypassed the Alamo. His doctrine of exemplary punishment demanded a direct assault, and the garrison made him pay for that choice. The strategic impact was decisive. The fall of the Alamo transformed the Texas rebellion from a political dispute into a fight for survival. Recruitment surged. Volunteers poured in from the United States. The deeper weight of the battle is symbolic. Newspapers quickly called it the Thermopylae of Texas. The parallel is imperfect. Thermopylae was a chosen rearguard action by professional soldiers. The Alamo was a siege that trapped men hoping for reinforcements. But the emotional architecture remains similar. A few holding out against many, knowing the probable outcome. Santa Anna took the Alamo, but the cost of that morning ultimately lost him Texas. They were a garrison of volunteers, adventurers, farmers, and politicians. They held a position that a trained military engineer would have abandoned. They held it until there was nothing left to hold. Men fight when cornered. That requires no explanation. The lingering question is why they stayed when leaving was still possible. The lines were porous enough for couriers to slip out. There were nights when a quiet withdrawal might have saved most of them. They stayed because they believed reinforcements were coming, or because Travis's conviction held them together, or because leaving meant surrendering the revolution. Most likely, it was a combination of all three. What remains is a heavy historical weight. The reality that some positions are held not because they can be defended, but because someone must hold them, even if those holding the line will not survive to see what their delay purchased. Today, the Alamo Chapel stands in the center of San Antonio, dwarfed by hotels and shops. The stone is pale, weathered, and quiet. There is no grand list of virtues carved above the door. It is simply a building where approximately 200 people decided that the place they stood was the place they would stay. But 270 years before Travis wrote his letter, on a small island in the Mediterranean, a handful of aging knights received a similar ultimatum from a far larger Ottoman army, and sent back an answer that still echoes through military history. If this journey through time captured your imagination, smash that like button and subscribe for more historical deep dives. Every like helps our channel grow, and every subscription brings you closer to our next destination.